So you're looking for a cheap ultra-wide HDR gaming monitor, and thankfully you've stumbled across this video because that's exactly what I got sent to me by Jlink. But keep your pants on because I'm going to be taking a very thorough look at this to determine whether or not it's worth your hard-earned cash. And in order to do that, let's slip and slide right into the specs. So what we have here is a 34-inch 3440 by 1440 165Hz HDR gaming monitor with Freesync and Gsync support, although they actually only advertise it as a 144Hz SDR display. Also, it does come with a stand that can do all the typical movements you would expect, holes for VESA mounting, and in terms of ports, we're talking about USB up, USB 2, LAN, DC 24V, which is actually very disappointing that it's not a regular PC cord, HDMI 2, DisplayPort, headphone jack, and a Type-C port. So that's actually quite a bit, and on paper it sounds pretty good. But what about the price? Well, right now on Amazon it's going for $430, but if you click my affiliate link in the description below, from the 13th through the 19th of February, I was told it will allegedly be an additional $60 off, putting it at just $370, which would also make it the cheapest display on Amazon with these specs. But how does it really perform? Well, first let's go ahead and take a look at the color accuracy. And here you can see that out of the box it's not too bad, has a delta E of just 2.3, and it's just a little bit too cool at 7849K. So I was able to get it down to delta E of 0 with a 6905K white point. So unfortunately I wasn't able to get to 6500K because it has pretty limited options for adjusting it within the monitor, but hey, that's actually pretty good, especially considering the price. Now in terms of the actual color gamut coverage, we're talking about 99.4 sRGB, 84.7 Adobe RGB, and 88.2 DCI-P3. Now for gamut volume, I got 133.2 sRGB, 91.8 Adobe RGB, and 94.4 DCI-P3. And of course I will have all of my instructions on how to actually color correct this, as well as an ICC profile for not only this but all the displays I review in my Patreon linked in the description below. But now let's go ahead and move on to HDR brightness, as this is technically an HDR display and you can enable it within the display. And if you do so, in terms of the 10% window, I was able to get 447 nits. So for a regular LCD panel, that's actually not too bad. It does beat out the cheap XZ273U I reviewed, which is a 240Hz 27-inch 1440p panel, although it does fall far short of other much stronger HDR panels. And of course we do have to keep in mind that this doesn't really have any local dimming or anything like that, so the HDR presentation isn't going to be that great. Moving on to the peak brightness in a 100% window, here we can see the LCD does show its strengths, getting 444 nits, which is actually pretty good and definitely a lot higher than some of the OLED models, although it does fall far short of the mini LED Asus PG32 UQX, although that monitor I think was around $3,000, so not quite a fair comparison. But now let's go ahead and take a look at a game, and here you can see that it actually gets 420 nits in Battlefield 1, which does actually put it behind all the other OLEDs as well as the mini LED, although it is doing pretty respectable numbers again for regular LCD. So is this a true HDR monitor? Honestly, I'm going to go ahead and say no. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous in 2023 to be trying to use a regular LCD panel and do HDR on it without local dimming. That's just going to be a hard pass. Now at 144Hz, it does have 10-bit color. Now whether or not that's true 10-bit or 8-bit plus FRC, I wasn't able to get any information on that. However, 450 nits, 10-bit color, it's kind of like 2/3 of the way there. It's almost an HDR display, but without local dimming. I really feel like it's not quite there. For me, HDR needs to have over 600 nits of peak brightness, local dimming, as well as true 10-bit support, although to Jlink's credit, they don't necessarily advertise it as being an HDR display. It's kind of just a little bit of an extra plus. But now let's go ahead and talk about overclocking, because this thing can actually reach 165Hz despite it only being advertised as 144Hz. And if we take a look at the total system latency at 165Hz, you can see it's actually giving us a pretty respectable 28.33 milliseconds of total system latency, putting it just behind the Odyssey Neo G8, which is a 240Hz monitor. So that's actually pretty good. And in fact, it's even a little bit faster than the S95B OLED at 144Hz. So pretty good there. But what about the actual ghosting and blurring performance? And here we're going to be taking a look at the 3 different overdrive settings. First, starting off with low, here you can see there's quite a bit of dark smearing right behind these objects. Moving on to medium, it does get cleaned up quite a bit on the brighter background, and then moving over to the maximum setting, it cleans it up the most, but unfortunately you actually start to get some inverse ghosting. So I definitely would recommend either medium or low, and I actually do recommend low, and we'll talk about the reasons why near the end of the video. But if we compare this to that 240 Hertz display I was just talking about, we can see that this one does give you a little bit less smearing, and when compared to the S95B OLED, yeah, the S95B is like taking a screenshot. So here you can see that when you're using LCD technology, almost no matter how high the refresh rate is, there's going to be some amount of dark level smearing, even on the best of displays, and it goes to show you that going OLED definitely has its advantages when it comes to the clarity of the image. But overall, I'd say that this monitor has probably a little bit more smearing than I'd like to see, but honestly, at this price point, it's something you kind of just gotta expect. But speaking of price point, what do you get at this price in terms of the finished viewing angles and uniformity? Well, the viewing angles and uniformity I felt overall were pretty good. I think that the curve on this monitor definitely helps hide those uniformity issues that you do see on LCD displays. So I think it was a very good choice to go with a curve on this, since you really won't have to deal with seeing it at a massive angle. Now, in terms of finish, it is using a semi-matte finish, and you guys know that I hate matte and semi-matte finishes. But to be fair, at this price point, I don't think it's a huge deal. If we're talking about 4K mini LED OLED, that type of technology, especially in conjunction, at that point, we have to go glossy, otherwise it's gonna really harm my rating of the display overall. But when it comes to these cheaper displays in like Quad HD or even 1080p, I think it doesn't really matter quite as much. I think you can get away with an all right semi-matte finish, and I do think this semi-matte finish is far less aggressive than other ones I've seen, definitely less aggressive than a full matte finish. So ultimately, I think it's fine for this display. But now let's go ahead and talk about some potential issues, because of course every monitor has at least a few oddities to it. And for this one, let's start off by talking about G-Sync. Now, this is not technically a fully branded G-Sync monitor, it's G-Sync compatible. And since that's the case, like many other displays, it will potentially have a few issues here and there when it comes to flickering. Now, I saw some at 165 Hertz when I overclocked it to that, but I didn't really see any at 144 Hertz. So for that reason, if you do want to use G-Sync, you might want to keep it at 144 Hertz to avoid G-Sync flickering, or you could also do G-Sync plus V-Sync in the NVIDIA control panel to try and cut down on that, as that could potentially help. Now, in terms of other issues, there was one major one that I wanted to bring up. If you do increase the overdrive setting to medium or higher, you will definitely see some red smearing on certain objects. So that's something to keep in mind, that I definitely would keep it to that low overdrive setting. I would not push it any further, which unfortunately means you are going to get a little bit more dark level smearing than potentially what you could expect to see out of the medium or even max overdrive setting out of this display, which is likely what they use to get their 1 millisecond rating that they're using to advertise on their page. So it's unlikely you'll actually see those 1 millisecond response times when you use that low setting, which is a little bit unfortunate to see, but not uncommon for these types of displays. So as a conclusion, overall, should you buy this display? And honestly, guys, here's what I'm gonna say. At $430 right now, I think that's too high for what you're getting here. However, if you do actually use the discount code that is allegedly going to be going live through the 13th through the 19th of February at $370, I do think it is worth considering. Now, I haven't had a lot of time to have my hands on a ton of cheap displays this year, so I can't tell you whether or not there could be some potential other 34-inch better options that are non-HDR. That is something that could be the case, but from all the stuff that I've tested so far, from the budget displays I've had my hands on, I think at $370, it does give you decent value. I don't think I would go too much higher. I think once you start breaking over $400, it's hard to recommend any LCD displays, but under that $400 price point, considering you're getting an ultra-wide monitor, and it does have good brightness, and I do believe it also has some good color accuracy as well, I do think, again, it is going to give you some pretty decent value, so I will have a link in the description below if you're interested in checking it out. Be sure to do some more reading up on it in the description to make sure that it's a good fit for you. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, RuPro has you covered with their RuPro 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable, available in sizes ranging from 3 to 165 feet, and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K at 60 FPS or 4K at 120 FPS HDR10 video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports eARC. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out RuPro on Amazon today.